Alright, I've had to switch back to my other camera. I hope we don't get too much of a whine, but my phone is just not cooperating and I don't have my iPad available today. So I did show you how making a wash of the turquoise and just kind of stroking it on. You want to make sure that it's very wet because you just want it to kind of soak into the paper, and we don't have to worry too much about lines, but I want to see a smooth mix of color, not just a bunch of lines. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the white and the yellow, and we'll put a little yellow on there. And if you find it's too thick, just wet your brush and spread that out. Okay, let's go for a little bit of the lime. Got a little bit of lime in here. You want to get it different areas of your paper. Now that's too much green, so sometimes if you get too much, you can just come in and blot it right out. Alright, let's go for a little bit of orange. A little orange and white to make a little sherbet orange color. Now you can do this with a media paint, you can do this with watercolor, you can do it with any paints, but I just happen to want to play around with Dina Wakley's paints today and see some of that versatility. So, got some orange on there. Spread that out a little bit more. Alright, and now I'm going to go for the blackberry. Okay. Let's get some more water on there to spread that around. Put a little bit of white in with it to lighten it up. And I don't have to cover every bit of white space, but I've got most of it covered. And let's put a little bit of that up here where we got too much orange. Maybe go back to a little bit of turquoise up in there. And be careful that you don't make mud. And that looks pretty good. Okay. Alright. I'm going to blot some of that so that it dries faster. Then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my stencil and I'm going to put it down right here, and I'm going to take a large palette knife and pull out a little bit of the modeling paste, and then I'm going to spread it over my stencil. I'm doing it now so that it has a chance to dry. I may also have to dry it with a heat gun, which is fine. You can do that too, especially if you're like me and you don't want to sit around waiting for something to dry. Okay, spread that pretty thinly. Take it right off, and you want to wash that off your stencil right away. I'm going to use baby wipe to do that so I don't have to get up in the middle of the tape. So there we've got some texture and a little bit of contrast too with the white on it. I just like to take a lot of different mediums and a lot of different colors and play around. Don't really know what you're going to get when you start. Be careful of your stencil. Don't bend it or tear it. You can also clean this with hand sanitizer. It's real quick. Okay, and then I'll move this out of the way. I could be using a craft sheet, but I'm using this rubber pad that I stamp on, and it's the same thing. Okay, so now I want to come in and use my stamps. So this is the Flower Garden set of stamps. I'm going to move this off to the side. And I'm going to take the stem and leaves, and I'm going to bend it just a little bit, which you can do with cling stamps. And I'm going to use the tree branch archival ink. You want to use an archival because if you use water-based dye ink, then with all the things that we're doing, it can wipe off, and we want this part to be permanent. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp here, re-ink it. I'm going to put 3 of these on because you always want to use odd numbers. Let's see, I want to tilt this the other direction now. Okay, and back to the original direction. And we'll put our 3rd flower on. Okay, so I chose the cone flower, but you can use, any of the flowers that are on there. And I'm going to use that same tree branch ink. You could use the black archival, but I liked using the tree branch because it was a little softer image and it blended in a little better. And I got that on my modeling paste area. You got to be careful that you don't do that and mess up what you put on. And I did. I messed it up, so I'll probably have to do it over again. That's what I get for not drying it. And we'll stamp our 3rd cone flower right there. Okay, so that's where we are so far. And I want to go ahead and use my paints now. I'm going to use a smaller brush. This is a small filbert brush. You can use a round if you like. And I'm going to come into my paints. And I'm going to start out, oh, I didn't put the pink on, hang on. Let's see. Here it is, the magenta. Okay, so then the secret to this is to have just a tiny little bit of paint on your brush. You can always come and pat it on your rag. And then I'm just going to, it's cat hair, I'm just going to kind of come in here and just use a real painterly look on these petals. I'm not going to cover the whole petal, I'm not going to put it on every petal. I'm just going to hit and miss a little bit. And you don't want your paint to get too thick, so be sure that you have it thin enough, but a small amount on your brush. Because if you get too much on your brush, then you're going to get something heavy like this, and that's not the look that you really want to go for in this instance. Want there to be enough to where you can pick it up and see it. It doesn't get blended in with the background. So there's like a fine medium line there. With practice, you'll know what that is. I'm sorry, I hope the puppy barking in the background doesn't distract you. I have a grandchild and a grandpuppy with me today. Okay, so then the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some of the orange and a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to come back in and catch the other side of each of those petals and add that color. Okay. So I'm going to finish putting those in there. Alright, and then I'm going to take some yellow, and I'm just going to put it here in the bottoms of this cone. I don't want to put it all up in where most of the stamping is, because then it just ends up getting lost and not the look that you want. So put that in there, and if you want to have a little bit more dimension in there, you can also come back in here with the orange and put a little orange here in the bottom. Got too much paint on my brush there. You can come in here and put a little bit of orange down here toward the base, and that gives you some depth as well. Alright, now I messed up my stencil, so I'm going to need to put that back on. And okay, so let's put that back. It's not too hard to place it back on the right spot. Now let me turn it this way so I can catch it right. Okay, back to our modeling paste. And I will put that back on. So if you mess it up, it's not a problem. Just bring your stencil back out and put it back on. It also doesn't hurt if you only mess up a little bit of it if you don't have the complete image. You don't have to have it. Alright, so we got that back. I'll have to be careful about getting into that again. Okay, so then I want to take a little bit of the lime green that's here on my palette, and I'm going to use the same brush and the same method and put just a little bit of green in the leaves and the stems, just to bring these guys up off of the background. I'm using a drier brush for this, but I'm using just very little paint as well. Okay, so we've got our flowers kind of standing out a little bit from the background. If you wanted them to stand out a little bit more, then you could use black archival ink to stamp with, but I kind of liked having the softer look. And so that's what you have if you just want to stay with the soft look and have this as a background. Now if you want to get silly, like I did, and add the crazy birds, then you can do that. And I used this one down here, and I also used the little fat guy, this fat guy. And what I did is I took one of the stems from my flowers stamp and put it on there, and I used my tree branch, brown ink, and so I made a tree branch for my bird to sit on right here. And I first stamped the bird in the watering can, and I didn't like it, and then I stamped over it in archival, and that was a little bit better. But I think this time I'm going to stamp him in potting soil. I want to stay with the browns, but I want a little deeper brown, so I'm going to use potting soil. Still staying with the archival inks, because I want it to be a permanent image. I'm going to turn this sideways so I can make sure that you're seeing it and that I stay out of my other modeling paste area. Okay, so he looks a lot better on there in brown. And then I'm going to put my other bird in that, down here at the bottom, in that same color. Boy, some part of me wants to mess that up a lot. Okay, I'm going to put him right there. Okay. And then I colored them the same way, with the same paints, same palette. I'm going to come in here and get a little bit of yellow for this guy. Come up around here. I'm mostly sticking to the areas that are clear. I don't like to get over into here because it just gets a muddy look. Okay? Now I'm going to get into my orange. I'm going to paint his beak. And I'm going to come up here to this guy as well. Put his beak in there in orange. Then I'm going to get into the white. I need to put a little bit more out. And I'm going to paint his eyeballs white. Again, I'm staying away from the stamped part. And I kind of think that makes him look a little more crazy, having those white eyeballs. Come up here and do it to the other one. I don't have any black paint out, but if I did, then I could dot those eyes as well. And I may do that before I call it all done. And then now I'm going to come back into the orange again, just a little bit on my brush. And I'm going to come around here and shade just a little bit around the edges to give him a little bit of dimension so that he doesn't look so flat. A little bit under the eyes. And down here. See what a difference that makes? So there's that little crazy guy. Going to come up here to this guy. Notice I'm using all the same palette so that it all mixes in together. Now I'm going to come back and use my turquoise for this guy. And I think I want a little bit more water because I want that to be a little more pastel. And I'm going to come up in here and fill him up. A little bit more color. Then, after I give that a second to dry, I'm going to do some more on that. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to I mixed a brown by using my violet and my yellow because those are complementary colors. Oh, it's dry, so let's make another one. Those are complementary colors, and when you put them together, they make brown. Let's get a little bit more of that. So that makes a brown, and it matches and harmonizes with everything else I've got on my page because I'm using the same colors right there that I've used all over the page. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paint his branch just a little bit. Again, very painterly, leaving, not worrying about full coverage, just a suggestion. So there's his branch. Okay. Let's see. If you want to come in and get just a little bit, tiny strokes up here on that cone, the seed cone, you can do that. Not necessary. Don't do too much. Too much messes it up and blows it, ruins it. Okay, so now this has had a chance to soak in a little bit and dry a little bit. So I'm going to come back with some full strength turquoise. And I'm going to go around his edges, and it's a little bit too full strength. Okay. And use the same color, but a little darker value this time because it's closer to full strength, and put in his shadows so that he also doesn't look just like a sticker. Okay, and I might get just a little bit in his tail right here. Not much. Okay, so now we're back to our modeling paste. It has not yet dried, so I'm going to go ahead and do something else, which is I'm going to take my Vintage Photo Distress ink and I'm going to put it on my applicator, and I'm going to go around my edges and let that color, it's a yellowish brown, which is kind of what we've been using, what we've got from the violet and the yellow. So it's all in the same color family, and I'm going to edge my papers with this color, kind of give it a little framed look, an inclusive look. Kind of pull that all in together. And I'm also going to put a little bit of ground in here for this bird to sit on or to stand on, because he's not really flying in the air, he's standing. So I've got that. Now we are going to have to dry this area. So I'm going to use my heat gun. That's still got a little bit of sponginess to it, so I'm going to dry it some more. Now I'm going to go in with my paintbrush and my white paint, and I'm going to dab the white paint over top because it's a little bit translucent and I want it to show up whiter. So I'm just going to come in and dab on there. I'm not trying to worry about getting it all on every bit or in the lines. This style is very forgiving. I just want that to show up more. I could have tinted this with white before I started. I didn't do that because I really didn't know where I was going with it when I first did it. And so the second time that I'm doing it, I just wanted to show you my complete process. Okay, so just about got that done. Let me get the stems. This is really all just kind of, playing around like you would do in your art journal. You can take these old snippets of technique and do something different with them. Basically, I'm using a pretty dry brush to do this, because I don't want anything to go sliding off. I want it to stay where I'm putting it. Okay, I think I pretty much got that covered. Alright. I'm going to give that a little shot with the air. I took my Distress ink because it's water soluble, and I went around it here over top of it so that I could get some ink on the edges. And then I took my rag with some water on it, going to dip it in the water, and wiped the ink back off of where I had just put that paint on, and we're left with the stenciled raised image with a lot of ink around it.